Yeah, welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We're going to do the part 3 of Sammy Gravano is a lying sack of rat shit today. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of things just to refresh your memory. This is going to be a lot of testimony. We're going to go over into other things. But he always claimed that he wasn't a drug dealer, and that was his stance. And he testified to the fact multiple times he wasn't, but then he was caught under cross-examination lying. We know that John Gleason, the attorney at the time, the government attorney, lied, suppressed information. It's never, ever, ever, ever been about the fact that John Gotti was a saint. Okay? Rather different. He wasn't. He ended up in jail because of things that he did. Those are facts. But I have always said you should not be, men should not be able to put men in jail with the words of their mouth. If you look in the case of Jimmy Calandra, I'll give you a really good example. Did you know that everything that he testified to was word of mouth and hearsay? It wasn't from direct knowledge. It was things people told him. Anthony Spiro was convicted and put in prison for the rest of his fucking life, not because Jimmy Calandra heard Anthony Spiro say things. He heard it from other people. Hearsay was accepted in that trial. And once again, it's more of the same in this particular case. It's not about John Gotti being innocent. It's about Sammy Gravano and impugning his character. Now, he has a great memory on his little podcast that he does, but apparently in 1992 or 1991, a year after he's arrested, he suddenly has fucking amnesia. Now, largely you would expect somebody who's fucking 80 years old or whatever, that's when they start to have these problems. But as you're going to see, we are going to prove a couple of things. So did Gravano commit perjury? That's sort of the big question that we're looking at. Throughout the trial, the defense emphasized repeatedly, that Gravano was involved in narcotics, but that they weren't. And what happened repeatedly was when the defense tried to say, look, he was in narcotics trafficking, he says he wasn't, but here's proof that he is. The judge would stop the defense from using that strategy and would instruct the jury that nobody in that indictment was charged with narcotics trafficking. And it goes back to this simple theory. If you're going to impugn the character of my defendant, why can't I impugn the character of your witness? And that is what's unfair and unbalanced in the justice system. Same thing happened in the Merlino trial. I told you last week with J.R. Rubio. Couldn't play the tapes of him going batshit crazy and saying loony shit. And that's just the reality of how the government operates. So we're going to go directly to some court testimony. The question, the drug situation, you've got to stand against drugs, haven't you? Sammy Gravano. Yes. Question. And you have a principle that you're totally against drugs, right? Gravano says yes. So he's stating off the bat, he doesn't do drugs, doesn't deal in drugs, will have nothing to do with drugs. Question, did you have a personal conversation with Patsy Conti? Now remember, Patsy Conti was charged with drugs. Gravano was caught on surveillance talking to Patsy Conti about narcotics trafficking, which Gravano says came at Gotti's permission. And the long end of it was, and the story that Gravano has weaved throughout the years to the government and anybody who will listen to him, is that Paul Castellano was taking drug money from Patsy Conti. Patsy Conti was kicking up to Paul Castellano, and John Gotti wanted Patsy Conti to kick up to him in the same fashion. Now, keep in mind, these are all the words of Sammy Gravano, but also keep in mind that Patsy Conti also instructed and told the government that Gravano was the biggest drug dealer that there ever was. And what did Gleason, and that came with DEA reports and some 10 other informants, that Gravano was a huge narcotics trafficker, which goes against his principle that he just said that he has against drugs. Do you see the hypocrisy here? Question, did you have personal conversations with Patsy Conti about drugs? Gravano, yes. And where did you have these conversations? Gravano, outside the Ravenite Social Club, in the street. Do you know approximately when you had these conversations? And if you can use as a benchmark, you said you were arrested in December of 1990. Is that in any relation to that? Gravano says a couple of months before, a little bit before, sometime before. Question. I'm sorry, you said how many months approximately? Gravano. A couple of months. Could be 4, 5 months. Question. How did it become a chat that you had a conversation with him? Gravano. I was talking with John Gotti. It was known to us that Patsy Conti gave Paul Castellano, our previous boss, large sums of money. At one point, he had given him a Rolls Royce and a Mercedes-Benz as a gift. I don't know if it was Christmas or his birthday or something, some sort of gift. Question. When you say he was doing what with Paul? Answer. What Patsy Conti was doing with Paul Castellano as far as giving him money, he wanted that to happen with John Gotti. Gravano says, I approached Patsy Conti. I took a walk with him. I told him I was aware of the Castellano thing. I told him it wasn't an investigation. I wasn't investigating him for doing drugs or being in the drug business. I told him to follow my conversation. I told him that we knew that he had, given Paul big amounts of money. I told him whatever he was doing, we wanted it to happen again under John. John had troubles with the courts and lawyers, and the administration was broke, and we needed some money. And I more or less gave him a tacit approval to go back and start his drug operation or whatever he was doing. So in other words, Gravano is starting the drugs operation with somebody else, but he's using Gotti as sort of the impetus to say it's okay. I told him I didn't want to know the details of the business. All I wanted was money for us. I told him not to approach the boss with any conversations, just talk to me, nobody else. And he accepted that conversation. So once again, Gravano looks like he's trying to cover John Gotti's ass, but in reality, Gravano is covering his own fucking ass. I had a conversation with him where he told me a fellow in his crew named Cheech, who was a friend of ours, a made guy in our family, would go and make a trip to Italy to resume our operations in Italy to start them up. I told him I didn't care what he did. Whatever he had to do, go ahead and do it. Patsy basically accepted that conversation, and that was the end of that. It never happened. It never materialized. But we know that that's not true because Patsy Conti got busted selling drugs. Gravano goes on to say, we never exchanged any money at all. We never started up any business. We had our problems with law enforcement. I went on the lam. I got pinched after that. And as far as to my knowledge, we never transacted any money at all. I don't know if he succeeded starting the business or not. I really don't know. But he's lying. Oh, question. You told us on direct that you took a stand against drugs. Is that true or not? I didn't say I take a stand against it. I said I don't like drugs and I don't like dealing in drugs myself. Question. You have a principle. I'm asking only about your principle. You have said on one or more occasions that you have a principle against drug dealing. Have you ever said that? I don't know. I don't have a principle against drugs. So he's waffling and changing now. And that, I've said, well, what I said was I was dead set against someone using drugs. Somebody, 2 people in my crew who did murders became crack addicts. I had to react to it. It forces my hand to react. On no occasion have you ever said, as far as your personal principles are concerned, that you take a stand against drugs. You have a principle, but that you, Salvatore Gravano, are against drugs. You don't ever recall saying that? Answer. Was I asked that question? I said, yeah, or did I actually make that statement? Question. Do you understand that when somebody asks a question and you answer it yes, you understand that you are agreeing to that question, right? Answer. It may not be my wording. A lot of things you ask me, I say yes. It's not my wording. If you ask me at the next trial, yes would probably be my wording. Do you agree with the statement that you, Salvatore Gravano, have got a stance against drugs? Would you answer that question? Yes, I am against drugs. Do you have a principle that you are against drugs? Yes, I don't like drugs. I'm against drugs. Is it accurate to say that you have been asked that you have very strong feelings about drug dealings, and your answer was, I imagine so? I have strong feelings about drugs and drug dealing. I don't like it. I won't be involved in it. Now, sir, you were asked whether or not the drug-related conversation that you had Now, sir, were you asked whether there was any drug-related conversation that you had outside the Ravenite Social Club? Yes. Is it not true that you said on occasion there has been drug-related conversations either with you or John Gotti or outside the Ravenite? Do you remember saying that? Well, basically, yes. And that statement, sir, that there was no drug-related conversation that you, Salvatore Gravano, had in or outside of the Ravenite Social Club is true today as it was when you said previously a year ago. I don't know. It needs explanation. I can't explain it. Sir, did you ever say that whatever else the transcripts or conversations are about, whatever the comings and goings of people in and out of the Ravenite to see you or John, no one was ever there to discuss narcotics trafficking with either you or John Gotti? Did you ever say that? Yes. Have you said it here, sir, that there was an occasion, however, that there was drug-related conversations when you asked Patsy Conti to, as you claim, resume his drug dealing? Did you say that, yes or no? Yes. As a matter of fact, your conversation with Patsy Conti on April 23rd of 1990 for the period of 7 minutes was actually concerned with, was it not, seeing that either he or Louis DeBono paid $500,000 to you and nobody else for money you believe Louis DeBono had robbed from you. Is that true? No. But we have documents to prove otherwise. Sir, you told us the rules of your organization that you're not to deal in drugs. Is that correct? Well, it's a hypothetical rule, but it's really not a rule. Is it a rule that you followed? Isn't that so? Well, not because of it being a rule. I was just against drugs. I didn't want to be in the drug business. But we know that he was the financer behind the Hunter ship that brought in tons of cocaine with Anthony Casso. Well, sir, have you looked at the indictment in this case? In what case? This case. No, which I find hard to believe. Did you participate in any agreement as far as you're concerned in any plan to import, here we go, the United States multiple kilograms of heroin, yes or no? My plan? Did you participate in your view? What was in my mind? I'm asking you yes or no if you can answer that question. I can't. You asked me what was in my mind. I can't answer that. Okay, so I'll reframe the question. You don't want to hear that? No, I'm going to give you every opportunity. Sir, did you ask anybody during your career in organized crime to import and possess with intent to distribute heroin? Yes or no? It's not a yes or no question as far as I'm concerned. All right. I take it, sir, that you did ask somebody to furnish you with monies that would result from the importation should it occur from narcotics trafficking. You did? Is that what you're saying? Answer, yes. I wanted him to resume what he was doing with Paul Castellano. That was what John told me to go there for, and John specifically told me we're not going in the drug business. Okay, does that make any sense to you? You're not going in the drug business, but then John Gotti is going to send you down there to talk about openly distributing narcotics. Oh, God. Let's see. Is your injection of this drug-related conversation, as you describe it, as an effort by you to prejudice the jury? Repeat that again. Is the injection of this drug-related conversation an effort by you to prejudice law enforcement against Patsy Conti, yes or no? And the reason why they're asking this is because they have the Patsy Conti letter when he's telling everybody that Gravano was behind a lot of the narcotics. His answer is, I'm talking basically about the murder of Louis DeBono. As far as drug conversation, why would I look to put that in as far as prejudicing the jury or making it up? I'm not saying that we got drugs and that we didn't get money or we dealt it. I'm just letting you know there was a proposal put out by John Gotti and myself to Patsy Conti. Did Patsy Conti discuss with you quantities of drugs? No. Can you answer that? Did he discuss with you quantities of drugs? Yes or no? No, I didn't have drug conversations with him at all. So you can see from like the last 2 pages, he admitted to it to now he's denying it to he admitted to it to he's denying it. So you had no drug conversation when you say you basically, with Patsy Conti, directed him to sell drugs. Is that what you're saying? You just said it? No, we just sort of played with words. You played with each other's words. I think you told me sometimes in the mob you speak with your eyes or your hands. Do you remember saying that? Yes. What signal did the jury look to? Did you touch your tie when you're talking to Mr. Conti? Answer, as far as drugs, Question, yes. Is that a signal? Are you touching your chin? Are you pulling your ear? Are you flicking your tongue? Answer, he was going to resume with an awful lot of money that's going to come into John Gotti. He was going to Italy to put this together. There is something that we know he did with Paul Castellano. I don't think he's bringing olive oil or cans of tomatoes and going to give over millions of dollars for that product. We're talking about drugs. We were near the Ravenite Club, and there are bugs, so you're not going to really basically hear or more likely see unless we were up in the apartment where he felt more comfortable. So there's a redirect. Now, you testified in direct examination that you had discussions with Patsy, Conti, and Cheech at the Ravenite Social Club around the time of the San Gennaro Festival. Do you remember that? Yes. Now, the proceeds from that endeavor, what you talked about, where were the proceeds going to go from that to John Gotti? And when you had these discussions with Patsy Conti, did he agree to restart his business? Yes. See, that's completely the opposite of what he just said earlier. What he said earlier was, I don't know. We just sort of left it on the table. Nobody said anything. Nobody agreed to anything. I don't know if he ever really took part in it. And when he brought Teach down, what was the purpose? It was an explanation of what was done. Sir, you were asked whether you had any discussions at the Ravenite related to narcotics, weren't you? Yes. You were asked to recall whether anybody who visited with you and John Gotti ever had discussions related to narcotics trafficking. Weren't you asked that in a case in Manhattan? Yes or no? Well, in a different case pertaining to different people. I wasn't asked that question. I was asked that question. Do you recall having been asked whether taking all the surveillance at the Ravenite Social Club, all the goings and comings of other people, whether any of that related to drug trafficking? And you responded, not with you or not with John. Do you remember saying that? Yes. So you see where this is going, back and forth, lie 1 minute, lie the next minute. He can't keep his story straight. You're going to love this one. Isn't it a matter of fact that conversation that you had once again on April 23rd of 1990 outside of the Ravenite Social Club, in which you are speaking into the ear of Patsy Conti? Isn't that a time when you were, in your own words, shaking him down? Isn't that a fair statement? It was about money, not drugs. So once again, he said it was about drugs. Now he's saying it's not about drugs. It's just ludicrous. It's ludicrous. So let's see. Let me go down here. So let's talk about a Brady violation for a minute. So attached to a memorandum of law, Exhibit A, which is an affidavit from John Gleason in which he swears that in preparing Gravano's testimony in this case, he prepared a series of questions which would elicit from Gravano that he, as an underboss, knew that some crews within the family were engaged in drug trafficking, Patsy Conti's crew being one of them. Those questions, which we'll set out below, were designed, he states, to put the defendants on notice that Gravano's role and liabilities under Boss and the family embraced narcotics trafficking. That affidavit also reflects his belief that he had elicited from Gravano that Gotti directed to speak him from Conti. But if you look, what does Gravano say to Patsy Conti? Don't tell anybody we're having this goddamn conversation. So we talk about impugning somebody's character, right? He says he never did drugs, didn't want to be involved in drugs, yet here at every turn, through DEA reports, through the Patsy Conti letter, through Al Diarco's testimony from multiple informants, over 30 informants, all tell the government the same goddamn thing, Gravano's dealing drugs. But what does Gleason do? He sits on that till after the trial because they didn't want that coming up because they did not want his character to be impugned. So because if his character is impugned, it makes him look like a liar, and the government did not want that. So let's look at a Federal Bureau of Investigation 302. It's an FD 302, date 11/25 of 1991. A cooperating witness, Sammy Gravano, advised that Louis Melito was killed by members of the Gambino crime family. Gravano killed Louis Melito, not members of the Gambino crime family. Melito was one of Sammy Gravano's people. He had direct relationship with Gravano and his faction, as well as Frankie DeChico. Melito and Gravano were friends for years. Gravano proposed Melito to be made within the Gambino crime family. When he was made a soldier, Melito was placed in the new crew of Salvatore Tato Ariello. Melito's relationship with Jem Steele was also through Gravano. That's not true. Gem Steel was Melito's business, multi-million-dollar business. It was not through Sammy Gravano. It was through Gravano. Okay, let me just keep going. One day, Gravano was told by Frankie DeCicco that Louis Melito was present in Paul Castellano's house. That would have never happened because Louis Melito was a nobody. He wasn't a captain. He was an associate. He would have never been in Paul Castellano's house. There, in front of Tommy Bilotti, Castellano made an idle threat about killing Sammy Gravano. That's not true either. All lies. Upon hearing of this plot, Louis Melito panics and without Sammy Gravano's knowledge, terminated a business partnership. I want you to pay attention to this. This is very important. This is the reason why Gravano is giving the government for why Melito canceled their business partnership. They never had a business partnership. That's number one. Instead, William Melito went into partnership with Tommy Bilotti, knowing Gravano and others' bad feelings towards Tommy Bilotti and Paul Castellano. That's all bullshit. That's all bullshit. That is Gravano justifying murdering William Melito and justifying stealing his business. That's how he's justifying this. Thereafter, William Melito goes to jail. While Melito was in jail, Frankie DeCicco tells Sammy Gravano that he would kill Melito as soon as he gets released. However, Gravano tells Frankie DeCicco that he could live with what Melito had done to him. Indeed, after Melito's release from prison, Gravano told Melito that he had been forgiven for his evil deeds, but no longer would be doing anything with Sammy Gravano. Moreover, Louis Valario, a.k.a. Big Louie, would be Gravano's main guy. Melito also made the mistake of aligning himself with Joey Bilotti. After having done what he did, Melito should have stayed away from Bilotti. Melito did not accept it, and he would go over to Gravano's house, and he would send Mario Master Martino with messages. In addition, Melito started doing what Robert DiBernardo, a.k.a. DB, was accused of doing, talking behind people's backs. Now, last week, if you listened to what we talked about, it's the same premise. Gravano, first of all, had nothing to do with Gem Steel, okay? And Gravano wanted Gem Steel. So what does Gravano do? He starts telling John Gotti and anybody that'll listen that Louis Melito is talking subversive about everybody behind their backs. Louis Melito gets killed. Who do you think takes over Gem Steel? We've talked about this. Go back 2 weeks ago. You have Gotti on a transcript. Now he's got Gem Steel. Now he's got this. Now he's got that. He didn't have those things before. He said that DB was stealing from me. He wasn't stealing from me. We checked. Then Gravano told me he was talking subversive behind my back. Frankie, did he ever talk behind my back to you? No. I talked to everybody. Nobody said he was talking back. Are you seeing a trend in what Gravano has done? And Louis Melito was his best friend. He killed him and took his money. But he sort of lied. Well, he doesn't sort of. He does lie to the government and tries to make it an issue that Louis Melito is doing business with Tommy Bilotti and cut Gravano out of business. He's looking for an excuse to the government to lie and to justify that murder. And then he doesn't even admit to doing it himself. He blames it on other people, which we know he's guilty of. Here's another 302 from 11592. Cooperating witness Sammy Gravano furnished the following information regarding Louis DeBono. This information is not all-inclusive as to Gravano's knowledge of DeBono or his homicide, but we know that Gravano is responsible for this one. Louis DeBono owned one of the largest plastering. This is important. Louis DeBono owned one of the largest plastering and drywall companies in the city. Mario DeBono and Louis DeBono, M&D, located on Long Island. DeBono was a Gambino soldier in the crew of Patsy Conti. In the early 1980s, Gravano had a dispute with DeBono, which resulted in a sit-down before Gambino family boss Paul Castellano. DeBono asked Castellano to have Gravano killed over the dispute, but it eventually was smoothed over. In 1986, Gravano became a partner in two of DeBono's companies, M&D Drywall and M&D Plastering. How does he just become a member of those companies? The fact is, if you talk to Louis DeBono's kids, his family, they'll tell you that Gravano had nothing to do with his business at all. This is just what he told the government. The companies lost a great deal of money in large part due to Louis DeBono's neglect in managing those companies. In early 1989, Gravano learned that DeBono had failed to pay a withholding tax and that the government was taking action against those companies. Gravano ordered DeBono to pay the tax delinquencies. Gravano decided he wanted no part of DeBono and these companies anymore. He transferred his shares back to DeBono at a meeting held at DeBono's office in late 1989. Gravano goes to John Gotti and asks for permission to kill DeBono. Gotti did not give his permission. Instead, he told Gravano that he would take over operating DeBono and that he would make money with DeBono instead. Gotti ordered the DeBono to come to Little Italy Gotti passed the word to Gravano that he tell DeBono to come and meet him in Little Italy. DeBono repeatedly refused to come in. Gotti decided that DeBono would be killed for disobeying his boss and for failing to come in when called. Gravano states that on the hit was given to Patsy Conti, DeBono's skipper, to carry out. So let's go back a little bit for just a second. The reality is, who do you think took over M&D plastering after Louis DeBono died? I bet you know immediately who did. Salvatore Gravano. He was never ever involved with that company ever. Not once. But what does he do? He's told by John Gotti, have him come down and see me. Let me sort this out. He never tells DeBono. Never bothers to tell him. Gotti gets pissed, think the guy is, then Gravano puts it in his ear. He's talking shit. He's holding money back. He's stealing money. And what does Gotti do? He reacts. Should we go back to the Gotti transcripts where he's telling you implicitly, telling Frankie Locascio, this guy didn't steal any money from me. He's done nothing wrong. Everybody we've talked to have said he's a good guy. Gravano's lying to me. And I killed him because I took Gravano's word for it. Then Gotti goes on to say, Gem Steel, M&D concrete and plastering. Another glowing example of Gravano killing a motherfucker to take his business. Factual facts. Now, you've heard Gravano talk about killing Louis DeBono himself, right? He's bragged about it. But yet, 1692 of this 302, Gotti ordered Gravano to have nothing to do with the DeBono murder. And I'm not going to go on to who Sammy Gravano blames, but he blames Bobby Borriello for it and a bunch of other people. And that's that. That's the reality of this. You see just in the testimony, he lies nonstop. You also see through 302s what he's doing. He makes up shit. He invents shit to get what he wants so he could take their businesses. He gave so much a fuck about these people. Ask the Melito family what happened to all their father's money when he stole their company. He didn't give them a dime. Didn't look out for them. Like he likes to pretend to sit on his little throne of batshit crazy bones and tell you, I respected people, I cared about people, I looked out for people. No, he didn't. He killed them and took their business and the family went into fucking bankruptcy. Louis DeBono, Robert DiBernardo. Did he give their families, their children any money? Nope. Fuck them. Gravano's a piece of shit. He couldn't acquire a fucking nutsack without a doctor's help. If you had it, Gravano was going to steal it. And if he couldn't just take it from you through fear, he would murder you to do it. But he wants you to think he's this big construction magnate, that he's so sophisticated, so smart. And I hear mob genre guys say, oh, Sammy Gravano was a brilliant guy. No, he wasn't. It takes no brilliance to kill a motherfucker and take everything he owns. So stop saying the guy was smart and he was, he could think on a whole nother level. This is a guy who can't read a fucking sentence correctly, but yet he can do all of this wheeling and dealing. It doesn't make sense. And let me tell you another thing. Gravano never would have been on paperwork in a company to begin with. So that whole tax thing that he keeps saying is bullshit. It's bullshit. The government allowed him to just say whatever the fuck he wanted to. They allowed him to admit to only taking part in one single-handed murder on his own. We know it's at least 3 or 4. We know it's at least 4 that he committed. 19 murder conspiracies, fine. But the government said, well, he only shot one person. We know that to not be true. Go back and watch his fucking stupid podcast. He admits to shit that he totally refutes all of this testimony. Stop believing him. He's a fraud and he's a liar. Was he a gangster? Straight up. Can't say that he wasn't, but he's a piece of shit. And he's a liar. He's a liar. And the problem is, by the time John Gotti figured all that out, guess what? It was too fucking late. So, all that being said, we're going to get out of here for today. We are going to be back next week with an all-new show, new topic, and I hope everybody enjoys their weekend. Thank you for hanging out with me. It was a long show today, but I appreciate every single one of you.